get started here. Right, this is the Nevada Commission on Ethics Legislative Subcommittee meeting. At this time, we will call the meeting to order. In attendance, Chair Wallen, Vice Chair Reynolds. Are you here?
Yes.
And Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Okay. For staff, we have Executive Director Armstrong.
Here.
Commission Counsel Bassett. Here. Senior Legal Researcher Pani. Here. And Education and Outreach and Education Officer Harvey. Here. And Executive Assistant Saldana. Here. Okay. This time, please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Executive Director Armstrong, has the commission received any public comment by email to be read into the record?
The commission has not received public comment by email to be read into the record. In addition, there's no one here at the Reno State Bar Association office.
Okay, thank you. Next item, we're going to approve the October 15th Legislative Committee meeting minutes. Commissioner Reynolds was not present at the October 15th meeting, therefore will not be participating on this
I
item.
will abstain.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
No. Make a motion to approve.
All right, I'll second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. All right, item 4, review and discussion of materials provided by staff from other states and potential approval of direction to staff for drafting priorities and legislative approach. Executive Director Armstrong, please give us your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I provided a memo regarding some information from other states. I'll briefly walk through that. And then I think the bulk of today will be sort of discussion and figuring out which direction we want to go. The first item is abuse of power and unwarranted harm language. That's a provision that we've talked about maybe pursuing again. And I included the language from 2021 and the language from 2023. The 2021 language really focused on, like abuse of power and really like a gross or unconscionable abuse of official position that undermines the integrity or impartiality. In 2023, we took an approach of taking kind of the framework that we already have in unwarranted benefits and applying that to unwarranted harm. It would still require some personal or pecuniary interest. I think in the cases that we've talked about in the past, like it's your ex, and so you keep denying them a fishing license or something, that could be considered a personal interest. It would be tied just to a financial interest. And then I found Georgia has an abuse of official power statute, which talks about the use of powers or personnel of a state entity for personal purposes of coercion, retaliation, or punishment. And so that's kind of what I provided on the abuse of power one. There were some discussions about disclosure requirements. Do we have like written disclosure requirements? What do other states do? And I found that the National Council of State Legislatures had a good comparison of what people have to submit and disclose. And then some information about the Secretary of State's office, and they currently have financial disclosures that of course only applies to certain public officers. So for example, it'd be essentially our definition of public officer plus make over $8,000 a year. So for our commission, only Liz and I are required to file a financial disclosure. None of our commissioners are. So that kind of shows you where there's not necessarily a gap, but when you think of, all public officers have to file this annual disclosure, it's not really true especially for boards and commissions. It is for agency heads, and some elected officials if they're making above that 8,000 and elected candidates, but it's not going to cover everybody that is under our definition of public officer. We also discussed a little bit in response to public comments at previous meetings, like when confidentiality sets in, and from what I did is we're pretty close to everyone else in terms of everyone else kind of has this preliminary stage where you are where it's confidential, and then there's a just cause hearing or what we consider our panels, and then things become public. In some states, like we start an investigation, it's confidential, we notify the subject, they get a chance to respond. In some states, the subject isn't notified until like after the review panel process, which is
Wow.
interesting. So they have like
It
a
used to be like that.
just cause process, and then it's public, and they find out the same time it's posted on the website. So
Can you imagine?
so I know in that meeting, Chair Scheer talked about the changes they made in 99 to make sure that pre-panel our stuff is protected from public records requests and those types of things. So that's, I included lots of stuff about
Mhm.
that process. Oregon, because we talked about, can you create something to prevent someone who files a complaint from making it public? Oregon has $1,000 penalty for someone who violates their confidentiality statute, but it only applies to the director and any commission staff and members, I believe, in reading the statute.
Internal.
Yeah, it's internal, just like ours is. So, and then one of the things that has also come up more so in the full commission is this definition of appearance of impropriety, and that phrase, which is found in an exception to a rule. So the rule is very clear, but there's concerns about whether or not the exception to the rule has vagueness. And you can see our 2021, there was an attempt to define appearance of impropriety, which is interesting because it does help provide a definition, but the fight just shifts from what is the definition of appearance of impropriety to what is the definition of inappropriate, disproportionate, excessive, or unreasonable. So, I mean, the fun thing about the law is you can try to define stuff to death, but generally, like, you're gonna fight over definitions. That's just always gonna happen. So, so those are the four. The last one is gifts. Because we talked about this as a potential item for focus, since we've seen a lot more gift cases, and the recent F1 cases, highlighted our current lack of any sort of statutory guidance on ceremonial or educational attendance. So I provided links to a couple of different statutes, and a lot of them, for us, it would be around, how do you define a gift? We don't define gift anywhere in our statute. We don't say a gift is this. So that would probably be the most efficient way to do it, would be to have a robust definition of gift and say, these things are not gifts, and an educational thing may be a gift if, and lay out some factors, which is kind of what other states do. And I included the current standard for gifts there on page 8. So, and then the very last thing, the additional information, I provided a report on the strength of ethics commissions, just so you can see what an independent groups looked at and said, these are factors. I think I don't think it was the same group, but there was one group in like the early 2000s that ranked us as like 50th or 51st. We got like an F. In this particular index, we were right in the middle, I think, after some legislative changes. So that is good. There's not too much in here. Like, if you want to do a substantive change to the law, or there's like procedural changes. For example, Curtis isn't here today, but he's like, why don't 2 years statute limitation is really short. Should it be 4 years so it covers a person's whole term? That would be an example of like a procedural change as opposed to substantive. So with that, I'll toss it to you guys for open discussion. At the end of each one, I kind of put some considerations to take if we go that particular route. So you'll see there's like considerations and some bullet points. Those are my thoughts in terms of, so for example, on the gifts page, I said like the allowances should be narrowly tailored to prevent abuse. You don't want to create a exception that swallows up the entire rule. A flat limit, like, you can't accept a gift at X $100 is fine, but then you have to change it, and times change. So we see that sometimes. Last time we presented a statute, there was some pushback on our vendor threshold for cooling off. They said, well, yeah, but this, a $25,000 contract is not that much for Clark County, right? It would be for city of Ely, but it's not that much for Clark County. And so
25,000 for an individual.
And
It's a lot.
for a person getting the money is a lot, so so that, you know, those are just some examples of like considerations as we go forward, and I know that Liz and I'd be happy to provide feedback as you discuss these items, and you're welcome to go on a, you know, totally different topic as well.
So so what I would like to do, if you guys wanna just make some comments, ask questions about what Ross has presented, then the next step that I wanna do is talk about how narrow we wanna make our focus. I think we do wanna make it narrow, because when we put the whole kitchen sink out there, we don't get anything. So then after we ask Ross questions about his suggestions and what he's presented, then I'd like to get your thoughts and give me like your top 2 items to address or look at, okay? So who would like to start? You have questions for Ross?
Well, I do, but I was more interested in looking at the Oregon gifts one, and I don't wanna go too far off topic. They don't mention dollar amounts at all, right? Their definition is all based on what the event was and whether it was appropriate or not for fact finding or X, Y, Z.
Right.
That approach seems very logical to me, because otherwise you do run into the problem of, you know, escalating costs over time, and also what's inappropriate in one part of the state may not necessarily be the equivalent kind of thing. So that I found interesting. Is that something, I mean, we obviously see it a lot. Is that a new thing, or I haven't been on the commission very long, or is that something we've seen consistent over, you know, years, where gifts are a major item that come before us as a?
I think the most frequent gift question we get, and typically addressed through an advisory opinion, is the question of educational conferences. Someone wants to go to like the Salesforce conference, and Salesforce is giving a government discount or free passes to go to that conference and learn about Salesforce products. Or there's you know, some sort of group that is, I think a recent one we had was like the Lithium Trade Association had one, and they had, you know, discounted passes for government folks. And so the director of our economic development said, hey, can I take the discounted thing, or do I need to pay full price to go to this conference? We said, you can take the discounted one. It's not for you. This trade association isn't a vendor of your agency. You know, there's no current connection. So in terms of gifts, like we've seen recently with sports events, not as much, but there have been some in the past. I don't know if Liz recalls. I mean,
No, I mean, most of them in the past have been things like you're saying, like events, either a non-sports event, you know, like a dinner being put on by a group that may have business sometimes in front of a certain, you know, the requester's agency, or traveling, being paid for by a group, or that may be a vendor already, or those kinds of things. But the sports tickets is far newer.
it's a newer.
Much newer issue that has
And
arisen, probably
they
because
will
we
get
now
it a
have
lot
many more sports teams in Nevada, right? Wasn't probably an issue so much before.
I will say, and Sam may be able to confirm, we do get a lot of gift questions during training. It's like, wait, can we have like the fruit bouquet that's delivered at Christmas time? Like, you know, can I eat that like piece of cantaloupe or whatever? That is, we do get a lot of gift questions during training, even if we don't see it show up in cases. So it is a topic that people have lots of questions about.
I get those questions like when we're out at events or things, like those are the questions people ask a lot, or like, if a vendor sends us something, can we accept it? Or, you know, if such and such a place wants to comp me a night at a hotel, but then a person might, you know, I get a lot of those questions out in the wild, let's say.
Right.
So I think it is a big topic for people.
To have some
Right,
definition.
because
in
they
there.
don't know where those lines are.
So I do think that is something that the ambiguity and
Mhm.
that could be a very positive thing.
Yeah.
And I think you could see bipartisan support for clarifying that. So I think there is a lot to be said for that. I also think the abuse of power is a great one.
Yeah.
My concern is that could we handle the potential volume of complaints associated with it in our current structure? I would imagine we will see a lot of increase in our workflow.
Well, I don't know if we will, just because, I mean, we would get cases that. And this is, goes to a question for you when you talked about it being a personal or pecuniary interest. Where we had a situation where an individual who was approving work cards hated the individual who owned that business. And so this individual would deny the work cards for this person's business. And then these individuals whose work cards were denied, then they appealed it and they were given them. So, but that wasn't, there's no personal interest there. It's just two people hate each other.
Well, I think
I think we'll see a lot of
yeah, I think we would say that your personal hatred would be a personal interest because we said
Okay.
your personal, like, for example, in the campaign, like when you endorse somebody, you have a personal interest in that endorsement and that campaign succeeding. It would kind of be the opposite. I think we get a lot of complaints now about bad government that are not or
Yeah.
perceived bad government, right? That are outside of our scope that I think if you crafted the abuse of power correctly would still not fall into the bucket. But those occasions where there is an issue, I do think we'd see an increase of investigations, but I still think, I don't know if it would increase the complaints that come in or just like the ones we get, some of them would go
We'd
through
be
to
able
the
to do
investigation.
under the Georgia law. So right now, for a complaint to come before us, we either have to start it or it has to be started by a citizen
Yeah,
it's a complaint.
any person except for inmates. can
Under
file a
the
complaint.
Georgia law, and I could have read this wrong. If a complaint is made internally at a government agency and it is considered abusive of power, would that constitute a complaint that they would have to then report to us? Like, my supervisor doesn't like X, Y, or Z about me.
Yeah,
And-
John, and that's exactly the problem, in 12 state agencies, and I have a lot of difficult issues, especially with, I'll name a couple without getting too specific, but taxi and taxi
Yeah.
and the NTA. But the issue you get into is you get a lot of disgruntled employees who want to go after their administrator or their supervisor. And so you get that kind of conflict. And I think we need to, it needs to be tied to some markers in there. And you talked about that, Ross, in terms of, looking at what you put forward in the last 23. And I think that's more appropriate language that you had in the 23 session than the 21 session. The 21 session, I think, leaves it is too open.
And I will
Yeah, I agree.
remind, like, we do have a provision in our jurisdiction section that specifically says employee grievances are not in our jurisdiction, which would, cut those out.
Yeah.
but-
The other thing in terms of, I've done a lot with work cards during my tenure as a city manager. And we had the easy answer is handle it internally. And you have a work card review board, and we had work cards reviewed by a separate non-interested entity that people served on it, both public and internal people that served on the review board for the work cards. It made, if there was an appeal, they made the decision on that. And so
Well,
there's
there's
no
a small
easy-
county where only one person filled out the.
this
work
was in
card.
Elko County, this was in Elko, and it was small, there's only 8,000 people. When I first got there, there's significantly more than left,
Mhm.
but we had a review board that,
Yeah.
had people look at it, and I think that's I don't want the state to get involved in administering local issues.
Right.
But providing a framework for review on those issues, and I think that's the important portion of that. That's my 2 cents on that. I think we really need to have a definition.
How would you draft it differently then?
Well, I'm gonna skip to another subject here, but my two, that's one of the two which I think are important to look at. But the other one is, I think we need a broader definition of gifts on that, and I think we need to have, I know that
Yeah.
Governor Sandoval had a very good gift policy at the time he came in. It was pretty stringent. But, you know, it was the same for everybody, and you had to, you know, follow it for all the department workers. And, you know, it varies by governor, but I know that I thought was a very fair and distinct policy. And his chief of staff and his policy advisors were versed in that to be able to handle questions, so and handle issues. And the training conference issue, that was a real common one I saw, especially with OSHA. Because we had, you know, vendors and national companies that wanted to have people come, and frankly, you know, I wouldn't let them.
Yeah.
Simple as that. I mean, if there were a vendor, you know, it should be prohibited, I think. But, you know, if it's general, not tied to a contract within the agency, and it's good for education, you know, then we would approve them. But
Yeah, I just made a note in here. For me, the definition of gift is a gift to an individual who is a decision maker.
Yep.
Even if that agency or entity isn't in the market at that time for that product, it could potentially be. And people should not accept gifts. And if they receive a gift in that case, and not that we bought that much in the controller's office, but Christmas time, we'd get fruit baskets and things like that. I just take it over to my other office and give it to my staff, you know, and let them have it, you know?
the same thing always.
Yeah,
I
I mean-
I paid for my lunches or dinners 100% every
Mhm.
single time for whatever,
yeah,
you know, just because I didn't want the appearance
exactly.
of.
So, you know, I think if we work on the definition and, you know.
That's also why you're on the ethics board. We're the exceptions, not the rules, right? That's why you need the rules. Yes.
I did on the gift thing, yes, that was interesting that National Association of Attorney Generals sort of said like the rules can be based on source. Right, what is the source of the gift? So these would be things to look at as we worked on that definition, is the intent and then just kind of general, you know, ours is. I think ours is closer to that kind of intent, right? Like, would it make a reasonable person depart from the impartial discharge of their duties? Which is, although we get lots of questions when we go to training, when we talk about like what is and what isn't a gift, they get that piece like, oh yeah, that's gonna, you know, and we basically tell them, what is your relationship to the source? What is the timing of the gift and the value of the gift, or sort of those are the three factors we've looked at, not based on statute, but based on our own previous decisions in determining if a gift is improper under one. But I think the unwarranted harm piece helps the general public more, right? That's more like this is what the general public wants, is people to have you know, take a closer look at some of the government conduct. Focusing on the gifts is a real focus on providing clear guidance for our public officers and employees so that they can make the right decisions when they're out in the field.
Yeah, I think I definitely think we should have something. I noticed that in, was it the swamp report, I think? Yeah, that was it. They talked a lot about, okay, their direction was, okay, if you don't have a policy of gifts being over $250 not being allowed to be accepted, then you don't score any points in there. So they had a dollar amount in there. I know what we talk about, like, all right, well, inflation, things will go up there, but you know, you start and it's like, all right, well, this really isn't going to influence me if you don't have a dollar amount in there, because pretty soon, well, you know, 5,000, that's not gonna influence me. And, you know, and pretty soon you're out there. So I would like to consider a limit on gifts. I mean, just based on that swamp report, what they're talking about, you know? So I thought that was very interesting there.
And the threshold, so the Secretary of State's office, on your annual financial disclosures, you have to disclose gifts you've received. There's a bunch of exceptions to that, like if it was for a holiday or birthday or if it's from a family member.
Mhm.
But the threshold for reporting currently at the Secretary of State's office is $200.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. My wife was in charge of libraries for the district, Washoe County School District. We did all the training and cataloging and managed the database for all the schools. And she went to the, you know, national, not often, but National Library Conference,
Mhm.
which is huge. And they give out, the vendors there, large, give out, you know, a lot of books for free.
Mm.
And, you know, she would take them and put them into some of the libraries that didn't have, you know, larger budgets for books.
Yeah.
And that's a gift, but, you know, it's, you look at it, she didn't get it out.
Yeah, it's not.
There was no
for her, it's
pecuniary interest in it,
Yeah.
but it went to, you know, different schools. So I think we have to be careful in terms of sometimes how that works.
I can tell you what we went to the Fogel, which is like the ethics conference, and there were some they have to have a safe at their ethics office for gifts that people received ceremonially, but like can't keep. And I was like, I don't want to. So whenever we write it, as long as we don't have to have a safe in the office for gifts that have to be refused, I'm good to go on that. On that front. It's like, yeah, I mean, and it was more not like, you know, like diplomatic, like if you're overseas and you receive something, you can't reject it because that could be bad, but you can't keep it, so. You know, we
What
don't
do
want
they
to
do?
keep
Like
it the same.
sell them?
They have them there. and-
Annual gift.
That's what you do. You have like a like some sort of a auction where people can buy and they go
I-
to like fund something in the state.
Yeah, I think they figure out, it's up to that ethics group to figure out how to dispose of
To
it.
me, just give it to a charity for their fundraising.
Yeah, there you
event,
go.
Let them auction them off. Except for, how do you auction off some crystal thing that you're given with your name on it?
Chill.
Yeah.
Call them up, see if anybody wants to pay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
museums.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think we're all in agreement about gifts and definition and I would like to see a dollar amount on their stuff.
The other thing is the ceremonial duties of elected officials going to
Yes.
events. And I think that needs to be better defined. We've talked about that previously, and there are states that define them. That were in the list. You received.
Commissioner Miller, you agree with ceremonial duties, having something in there?
Yeah, I agree. Like the F1
Okay.
situation, yeah.
Well, Oregon's law is pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, they've got they've got lots of definitions in there, which helps provide guidance to
Mhm.
the public officials and guidance to the commission when we're looking at potential violations.
And for me, I think attending a conference that is sponsored by an association. That's, that's fine. It's like, okay, so if you're controller, you can go to NASAC, they give the controller's office $1,000 to cover their expenses. But, and so that's fine, I think, because you're going to learn and what have you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different, ICMA had, all of the ethics meetings, I was on their ethics regional board, and those were all paid for by ICMA or travel.
Mhm.
To participate in that. And there are other councils, we had a couple on transportation policy that I was on. And those were paid for to help off on that, so they get good attendance on it.
But I think like if a specific vendor. said,
It was
"Oh,
not
Yeah,
vendor.
I know, but to me, I think we should have in there, if a specific vendor invites you to, oh, we're gonna have this conference so you can learn about XYZ, but it's really a commercial for the product, that should be off limits.
Yeah, I mean, that you can pay whatever the cost of.
Mhm.
It's, the attendance should not be gifted to you.
Yeah, you can go, but you're gonna pay. Yeah. Exactly. So, okay, so ceremonial duties, gifts. We had disclosure in here. I think Commissioner Miller, I know that you were really interested in more disclosure and stuff at the time. Are you, after finding out how the Secretary of State does it, I think if anything, maybe we have a little meeting with the Secretary of State to say, hey, would you consider putting some additional things into your disclosure? We feel that this would improve ethics. I think that would be the direction to take.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's something we should bite off
Yeah,
at this point in time, but I do think it's something that would warrant a
Yeah.
continued conversation with them in conjunction
Yes.
to.
so maybe Ross and I could have a meeting with
Yeah.
our Secretary of State.
Yeah, we've been playing email tag and schedule tag. They've reached out to me, so
Okay, that's good. Then we
we'll
should do
circle
that.
back. I think it's in there, but we'll circle back on that one.
Cause I think that would be a good idea to,
I
you know.
look, I definitely think we could use beefing up. I think it is a hot topic and it's going to continue to be an issue.
It's gonna get worse.
So, but I think for what we have on our plate now and getting those right, I think is more important than
Mhm.
getting distracted with it.
Well, and to me, adding something in our law for them, it's like, no, we don't wanna add more layers here. So. Do
Yeah,
that.
I've kind of chewed on the idea of having like not like a certification that's established, but like ethical standards where an agency could say, we do these 5 things, and so we meet the gold standard for ethics, which could include HR of your agency maintains a list of everybody's conflicts of interest. You have a designated ethics officer, you have annual training, so that's something we can, like a non-legislative path towards progress on that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting approach.
And then, yeah, so I'll work something on that. I'll work that up and see what that might.
Yeah, Russell, one of the things I think, and I'm not sure we're ready for that, but I think it should be mandatory that every public officer go through at least online training, ethics training. As part of it, within 6 months of them taking office or their appointment.
And then a refresher.
Yes.
Well-
Well, change, and if they're, in the 2-year, over a 2-year period, they should probably have a refresher.
Mhm. Well, now that we have the online training, it's so much easier to do. Before, we didn't have that.
Right.
And, every single state employee, public officer, they have to take sexual harassment training. They have to take this training and this training. It's mandatory when you get in. So,
That's what I think should happen.
I agree.
Just a question on that. How does it work? Can you hear me okay?
It
Oh,
can.
yes.
Perfect. How does it work when we are suggesting a legislative change that would have budgetary implications like that? Mandatory training, for example. Just because I'm new to this process.
We put the bill out there and then local and state governments get an opportunity to claim how much it would take to enact, to comply with the law. They put their fiscal note on, and then we can see who thinks it will cost them money and not. There are some states that the language of the statute says, like, the Ethics Commission shall train all these people, and that's very hard for them to do because, but if you have, if you have training and you're able to say in the statute, Sam has worked hard to get agreements with different organizations that can either use Nevada Ethics Online, or they otherwise have our content uploaded into their own training thing. So I think at this point, certainly not last session or the session before, but at this point, I think we could make an argument that it would not cost. That there would
Yeah.
not really be a cost, other than time, right? There's like,
Okay, so an
Let-
hour.
Let me,
What is your?
I agree,
what is
but
the
not
current
completely,
time on
Sam. I
training?
think that's a very good question, and I wanna, from my perspective, I think that if we were to beef up anything, would be investigations and training, and I think you probably need additional help, additional staffing in the area of training, so there would be probably some fiscal impact to it. But the other part of it is that, at least for the rank and file employees, I'm talking about online training. And you've done some very good online material for training on that. But I think for public officials, I think that it may want to go past that and have active interaction with a person, actual training. And so that's gonna have a fiscal impact. And I think that's the consideration that we ought to look at in that. But in terms of general training, I think an online training program would be good for just regular rank and file employees, but they're not subject to as much, but supervisors and above would be. And I think that's where, you know, you would be overwhelmed by, or your position would be overwhelmed by the number of requests or just splitting your time and trying to get to everybody. So I think that, you know, that's gonna have a fiscal impact that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in addition to if we had a holistic training requirement, even additional folks needing to do the online training would have it, like, granted, not substantial budget requirements, but fiscal requirements in terms of like paying them more, so we have more folks allowed in that system at any given time. Like currently, I think we're at like 1,500 at any given time are allowed to be using that system, and that is like they log in once during a 365-day period, then they're countable as like an active user, right? So yeah, it would be like renegotiating that contract. So yeah, just kind of have that in mind in context of our conversations, and just being able to look ahead and justify the very likely necessary arguments to make in terms of fiscal implications.
Commissioner Miller, you had a question?
I did, I was just, what is our current time to go through the training, and what are the levels of training we have? Do we have like a general, and then do we have a supervisory, like, what are the time commitments of those currently?
Yeah, currently we have an ethics basics course. It looks like the data is showing it takes between an hour and a half to 2 hours to complete. And that is just a umbrella training for all public officers and employees. And there's an additional like kind of candidates and campaigns resource training that's a focused less than an hour training as well. But there aren't digital resources that are like your online training platform specified to a supervisor or a contract person or a fiscal person or HR person, for example. So that's something that we're incorporating into our outreach and education plan to develop as appropriate, but it's an interesting conversation to include in this as well.
when we do in-person trainings, we recommend they schedule 90 minutes, which covers the training and then questions at the end. Clark County, through their policy, they have different classifications of employees, and so their supervisors and managers are all fall into the annual ethics training each year, which they get through their Clark County training platform, or they have us come down in person usually and do a couple days as well. So they're probably our best example of a local government that has a robust ethics requirements internally and are executing it. That we're
Your gold star?
they would be close to that gold star, especially when they get that ethics officer that they're working on. So no, it's right.
Okay, so we have to kind of flesh that out, and maybe the training evolves, maybe it's mandatory training online. And then as time goes on and we gather more resources, then we can.
You could start with a statutory requirement just for public officers, because that's defined in a much smaller group than,
Yeah.
you know.
That's where I would head at first.
Yeah.
if you can.
Mhm. Yes. one thing, okay, in your materials here, you talked about how the forms that they affirm that, you know, they'll abide by ethics and stuff, right, for public officers and stuff. And you made a comment that, you know, we can't get a list of officers from the government agencies. I mean, how hard would that be?
I mean, so there's no because in previous legislative sessions, we have included that in kind of our omnibus bill. The Secretary of State's office receives a list and they require the agency to confirm their list is accurate. For individuals who are required to fill out the financial disclosure, again, that universe is smaller than our definition of public officer. So that would be a starting place would be just to request that list from the Secretary of State's office. But I know that in the past, that's been something they try to adjust by just like mandating that when they send it to the Secretary of State, they also send it to us. But it's a different universe. So acknowledgements are an interesting thing that we do. We receive them. We will do, I wouldn't say it's proactive enforcement of the acknowledgements, but we have in the past when we have the capacity and the you know, some time if we have a lull in incoming cases. Sometimes we'll just, if we have a problem agency, like we had some airport questions. And so we just looked at all airport boards across the state and found the airport board folks who didn't have it. And we send them a little email that says, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You have 30 days or we'll file a complaint against you. And they file them pretty quick after that. We just did that with the Verdi TV district. Was having some issues. And so we took a look and they had, you know, 2 people out of their 7 in compliance. And but that acknowledgement enforcement is an interesting one. Because we tend to think of enforcement as just complaints, but there are other activities we're regularly doing to do, you know, enforcement, whether it's public records requests or acknowledgement. Those acknowledgement ones, but we don't, like, what we don't have is a list to cross-reference as things come in. As acknowledgement forms to come in to say, like, we have 70% of the folks who need it. One, that list is always changing, and we don't have
The staff.
the staff. I mean,
We have full staff
technology
now.
could do it at some point, you know? But that acknowledgement piece
It
is,
seems like technology should be able to do that now.
it should be, I mean, if you took a list and then you compared it, but I don't think, like, for example, I don't think currently, and something we can make sure is in our new case management system, is, like, I don't think I can produce an Excel sheet of all the acknowledgements that have been filed by name in a way that is easy for, like, to cross-reference with if we had that as
Is that
Secretary of
because of our
State.
system, how it?
Yeah,
But we're gonna upgrade that.
the RFP is either up or about to be up
Okay.
for that.
That's gonna change. But
Yeah, we can include that in our needs assessment.
what is our definition of a public officer?
Our definition of public officer under the ethics law is, it's essentially anybody who has a government role and that role is established in the Constitution of Nevada, a statute, a city charter, a county code, so it's established in law somewhere. And then there's some other language in there about they have to actually have government authority, so, which excludes advisory boards, those types of things. But it's any position that is established in statute. So when we go to training, it's like if your county code says you're a director of, that there shall be a director of public works, the director of public works is a public officer. If your county code only says there's a county manager and that person can hire whoever he wants or she wants, then only the county manager
And
is.
what information gets reported out? I understand our definition now a little
Yep.
bit better. What is reported to the Secretary of State is only if they make over $8,000. That is
Mhm.
that is the different hurdle.
Yep.
How many of those people could exist? That's gotta be a small number that's gapping.
I would think
So the board
anybody-
commissions.
Lots of it would mostly be boards and commissions. It's gonna capture your city managers,
You're
your
not
county
making no
managers,
Yeah, no, I get it.
your, I don't, it would be interesting. I'd have to look at like what their definition is in terms of like does your agency, like Director of Public Works, fall into that definition? But mostly boards and commissions who get the per diem of, you know, their $80 a day or.
Well, we're the underpaid ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe, and when we talk to the Secretary of State, maybe he can, you know, when people file to run for office, they could put a thing in there. Okay, if you are successful, you need to do this. I mean,
Yeah, and we did, you know, we did the public, we did the candidates and campaigns training. After the election, we'll do a congratulations, you're elected training where we go over,
Mhm.
and that content includes the acknowledgement stuff.
well, and maybe for boards and commissions, here's something that we could use, like with the governor's office, go and say, okay, when you guys appoint somebody as part of, you know, besides, here's your appointment papers, you need to do this.
So right now, Sam
Same
works,
for legislature.
yeah, Sam works really closely, the legislature not so much, but the governor's office has been tremendous.
Good.
Especially under Governor Lombardo, they've really improved the appointment process. And so anybody who's appointed from the governor gets an email that has a link. Here's your acknowledgement form. Here's a link to sign up for online ethics training. And then I think there's some other stuff about resources. So we're lucky on, you know, from the governor's office appointments, but there's a lot of folks who are appointed by other people.
Well, you know, work with legislature and then also work with, you know, the different counties and
Mhm.
stuff to just say, hey, when you guys appoint a board or a commission that is considered to be a public officer.
Yeah, and I think that's the important message I think that we get out is that the initial appointment process should incorporate standards for disclosures or
Mhm.
what should be done in terms of ethics training.
Yeah.
And that really, I think is that initial appointment or initial hiring or however you want to tab it should have that kind of training because it's most effective at that point.
Yeah, I think you could, you know, that's something we could have a little piece written up that, you know, we push out. Sam can push it out and, you know, it's a start.
Yeah.
It's a start, okay. Morning.
Good morning, how are you?
All right, okay, let's see. All right, I think, we had talked about confidentiality of requesters, that was also in your material.
Mhm.
And, you know, so ours, it's only if they work for that agency or entity or they feel threatened, okay, which is pretty hard to define. I struggle with the fact that if you don't work for that agency anymore, that you don't have that protection.
Mhm.
So has there been thought about improving the confidentiality?
Yeah, so I would say the two things, if we want to go forward on additional confidentiality protections for requesters, which I think is worthy of taking a look at because we have not a lot. It's sort of one of those things where you don't know because someone doesn't tell you when they don't file a complaint. But we get a handful of folks who will call and ask questions about confidentiality and then not pursue it because they don't qualify for those confidentiality protections and they're fearful. So we can work up some language if you guys would like to see on what it would look like to say works or worked at an agency, right? That's a pretty, nothing is a simple statutory change. But the one that we see the most often where it's like, oh yeah, this is bad, but it doesn't fit is especially in our, well, in all of our jurisdictions is like a fear of economic harm, right? Like, oh, I own the local diner in town and if the county commissioner finds out I filed this, they're gonna ruin my diner and so the economic harm piece could be added to the threat of physical harm.
Comments from you guys, thoughts? Is that something you care about?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think for smaller entities, that's an important issue.
Mhm. I think we're probably all in agreement about that impropriety definition that, you know, like Executive Director Armstrong said, he says, okay, you define it this way, well then others are gonna say, no, it should be defined this way, so I don't, we wanna keep the bills smaller, not pursue it.
Mhm.
You guys good with that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So. Anything else from you guys? Cause I think we kind of did our questions of Ross and talking about our top things and things we want to do. We did it all together. So I think we kind of have a pretty good idea. So my sense from you guys, gifts,
Yes.
definitely, okay? Definition, source, intent, general, dollar amount. Ceremonial duties, we definitely want to have something in there for that, okay? Let's look at, we'll delve into the mandatory training of public officers to be done online to start.
Mhm.
And then confidentiality of people, if you're living in maybe by population, a small community, like you take Boulder City, because that's pretty small.
It is.
And, find a population amount that, okay, confidentiality provisions apply to populations of this. And I would even think like there's some town boards, we've had some cases where, they're dealing with that and it's pretty small, so look into that. Okay. Anything else?
No, I think that's a good scope.
Yeah, I mean, and when you come back with this, then we're gonna really sit down and have a hard conversation, okay. What do we feel is our top priority? Second, and do we stop at 2 or so? Because we may narrow it down. So right now we have like 4 things on there.
Let me ask the question, Ross. Obviously, the full commission has to approve. Those out.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
Where does it go from there? So we draft a bill draft request through the commission, and if we approve it, who reviews it after that?
It then goes to the governor's office
Governor's office does.
and they do their review.
Alright.
Or we might find an ethics champion in the legislature.
Yeah, I mean, you may get to the process where we want the bill that goes through the governor's office to focus on gifts or requests or we may have that conversation with them and say, which one of these would you most likely
Mhm.
pass through? And then we can always go to that interim committee, which has had some changes in leadership, but the interim, we can always submit the other proposals to the interim committee.
So you're allowed to do
Yeah, we can,
Mhm.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
that. So yes.
Yeah.
yeah. Hey, right, I think you did a good job.
You have to look at public comments.
Oh, yeah, I'm not done yet. I haven't closed out the meeting yet, Charles. All right, next item, commissioner comments. Additional comments you want to add or identify a future agenda item?
None for me.
I think we've talked a lot. Public comment, Executive Director Armstrong. Has the commission received any public comment by email to be read into the record?
We have not.
Are there any members of the public present who want to provide public comment?
There's no one present here in Rita.
Are there any members on Zoom?
Elvira Saldana, for the record, no, there are no public members on Zoom.
All right. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? You don't want to leave yet?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you, guys. That
Tight,
was-
you squeezed it in.
Yeah, well, like,
I wanted to make public comment and go on forever.
huh?